Welcome to Hope on Fire, relevant talk radio for young adults. Whether you're 25 or 45, there's bound to be a discussion that you care about. Our mission is to share practical ways to find God in your everyday life. And now today's host, Chris Lang.
In addition to serving the needs of the poor and sick in many countries, the Christian church is being stretched by increasing natural disasters all around the world. While we recognize these are end-time mile markers Jesus told us about in Matthew chapter 24, I also wonder how God is using these events to toughen up His people. Some believers struggle with occasional fear of future time of trouble or losing our family members, jobs, or other unknowns. An unexpected crisis, however, forces us into impossible situations where our only strength and hope come from God. Mission experiences can provide such unique workouts beyond our limits, where we learn more deeply and tangibly that our true home is not here at all. Hi, I'm Chris Lang, and today's topic is outside city limits. If you've ever struggled with panic attacks over flying or with life and death duties you only read about, then take courage from our guests today, Jason Shives and Sabine Vatel. First up, we'll get Sabine's first-hand view of her latest spiritual workout. Sabine is an associate pastor at the Forest Lake Seventh-day Adventist Church here in the Orlando area. Welcome to our program, Sabine.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
It's awesome to have you back. Our audience is no stranger to you.
Right. I'm glad for this opportunity to. What did you call it? A spiritual workout.
This is your latest spiritual workout. Now, Sabine, in a very serious way, the genesis of this spiritual stretching point for you came with a very serious event that happened recently. Tell our audience about it.
That's right. I'm trying to think the exact circumstances of how I heard about the earthquake in Haiti, and that's how it began. Just the news of the horrendous natural disaster, and we were just beginning to receive through CNN of the news of death and devastation in that little country. And
so you have Haitian roots. Your family background is
that's right. Both my parents are from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and although most of my family's moved in the States in the 60s, we had one uncle there at least who lived there and who has a business he runs there in Haiti. So it did hit close to home.
So after the earthquake, you lost communication with family members there, as many people did? That's
right. I mean, at least with this particular uncle, of course, the first thing you do is you try to call. Of course, there was no way getting through the lines, and I remember sending an email, let us know you're alive, that you're okay. And in the midst of that, hearing the news of people losing family members, there was a special number you could call the embassy, I think, but getting through that took hours and hours and hours. Actually, it took us 2 days, really. And after 3 days, we thought, at least I thought, I woke up one morning and the reality of it hit me is, maybe he's dead. And I think our uncle's bigger than life. He's always has been, muscular guy, a man's man, and big heart. And I woke up that morning thinking, maybe we've lost him. And that's my mom's brother.
All right, so your uncle Fritz.
That's right, Uncle Fritz.
Yeah, so you were praying for some kind of confirmation.
Right, his nieces and children. He had a young son of 10 who was praying a lot, and all of us were just praying a lot, hoping. And finally, we did hear something from one of his from his stepson, actually, that somebody had spotted him, that he was okay. And it was somewhat comforting, but we weren't sure, again, that how do we know it was really him? And the prayer, I remember my prayer was, it'd be so great to have confirmation and hear his voice, at least for my mom's sake.
Well, and then you had the blessing of seeing something visible.
That was amazing.
Let's check out this clip.
The world has promised to come here to help Haiti, but in the areas we've seen, the people are still having to fend for themselves. Across this capital city, they are searching, mostly in vain.
Is what? There are 2 bedrooms over there.
But in amongst all the death, some, like Archer Fritz, feel lucky. He's lost his house, but not his life.
I consider I'm happy. I'm leaving now, you know. I'm on life. I'm on life. It's the most important, you know.
So there's Uncle Fritz on the BBC.
Yeah, that was pretty stunning. My sister actually saw it first, and she was hysterical on the phone. And we're like, "What are you saying?" She said, "He's alive." You know, So we saw the news. It was just there was no words to really describe. But I mean, as you can see, you know, he looked good and he was alive. And I think there was no word to describe the joy of that confirmation, that answered prayer. It was amazing.
So you got invited to go down and help soon thereafter.
Oh, yes,
and
right.
did you not feel a gratitude inside? You used a term, the kind of joy was almost unbearable.
Oh, to see him alive, yes. I mean, for my sake, for my mom, who wasn't well at the time, and the joy was unbearable. Such gratitude, and you said that, and looking back, that was the what propelled me to even want to do something.
And you've had a panic over flying. You confessed it.
I know it's as you're saying, I was like, who is he talking about? But you know, I don't say that. I don't share that to many people. But flying. I wasn't always like that. But at some point in my life, I went through a very difficult time, and I think it coincided with my developing this really awful fear. Or I should say a phobia of planes, and so I don't go out seeking to go on trips to go fly somewhere, and if I do, it takes days for me to prepare.
So you had so you had to take that to the Lord, and you were asked to go to Haiti. And what happened after that?
Well, I was asked to go, and I said yes because I was waiting. I had already prayed that if the opportunity came, I would say yes. So what happened is that a team of medical doctors, thanks to the ACTS with David Canther, he's the organizer, and he assembled a team of doctors and nurses and spiritual care for a first responder team.
So you went down as a spiritual care support, not necessarily leaning on your nursing background, which, by the way, apparently God probably helped you use that, because just the sight of blood for some people, some people are fearful of the sight of blood and they faint on on the first sight.
Right.
So there was one fear that you had to trade for another, apparently.
I guess I never thought of being afraid of that, but I'm definitely uncomfortable in medical settings.
So you got to Miami, and it was sort of a waiting game that happened to you.
Oh, it was very frustrating. I mean, we have the supplies and again, medical residents and nurses from all over the world. You know what I mean?
In this first picture, you see all the supplies behind you and your friends here.
That's right, man. You found friends, actually, Charity and Fung, medical resident and registered nurses. And we're smiling here, and we make the best of it, but we were very anxious to just get to the country, provide the help that people needed. And this is what we encountered as we drove. We finally got there. As we drove to the city, this is just a small picture of how devastated it was. And as we drove around, the only thing people cried out for was water, which in the previous picture, we were surrounded by bottles of water, and I didn't realize how precious that was.
Let's stay with this picture for a second, Randy. Sabine, you talked before the broadcast about a person who lost his brother, and you, as a spiritual counselor, walked with him. And what happened when you were impressed to share something to comfort him?
Indeed, he had lost a brother, and this is pretty much the setting on the floor. And I know Dr. Jason and his team had worked on the code for a long time. We're now able to revive this young man. And his brother was extremely distraught. I mean, wailing and crying out for his brother. And I asked him if he wanted me to walk with him back to the body. And we walked him over there, and I began to recite Psalm 23 in French. My grandmother had taught me that long ago.
So you're fluent in French.
I am, yes.
But scripturally, there was that passage that you still remembered from
childhood, yes. And I used to want to learn it in English for some reason. It's such a simple passage that I couldn't quite get into my brain, and I used to bemoan that. But that French one stuck in, and I began reciting it.
Share a few of the verses in French, would you?
L'Éternel est mon berger, je ne manquerai de rien. Il me fait reposer dans de verts pâturages. Il me dirige vers les eaux paisibles. anyway, as I recited this psalm, he began to recite it with me, and the crying stopped for a moment, and we recited to the end. I said I'm sorry in French. I said, but I think the power of that word for this young man and how it connected us at that moment, and I realized how God used any experience that we have. He uses it to bless you and to bless other people, most importantly. So that was a powerful moment.
Talk about this little boy Pierre.
Well, he's one of a lot of children actually have lost limbs, and this one in particular had experienced a fracture. And when I met him, of course, he introduced himself as Pierre, and he had a fractured leg. I mean, from the hip down, extremely painful. And he told me that his father, he didn't have a mother, but his father had died in the he called it the event. He didn't call it the earthquake. So he was alone in the world, no brother, no sisters, no mom or dad. And I think this picture is the day after his surgery. And again, he's still recovering. Now, I was a go for this, I was a gopher as well, getting bandages, medication as well. And among all this, I found this little stuffed puppy animal. And I immediately thought of Pierre. And the reason why is because he had gone through a terrifying experience. We had another earthquake that morning.
You had an aftershock, didn't you?
An aftershock, I should say, yes. And of course, he was terrified. And when they put the IV on him, he just fought it. I've never seen terror in a child's face before like this. And the reason why, in his reasoning, after he calmed down, he felt that it was pinning him down if he needed to crawl out or run away if another aftershock came. Because, it's such a post-traumatic stress syndrome collectively for the people, but for children, you can imagine how terrifying that might be. And so when I saw the stuffed animal, I said, this would be a good thing for Pierre. So I came up to him, and he's on the floor. The bed is on the floor. So I said, Pierre, this little puppy has nobody to take care of him, and you are the right person to take care of this puppy who has no mom or dad.
Oh, that's so sweet.
So he
Sabine.
took him. I know, tell you, he took him and sat it next to him, because this is like a 8-year-old, and he didn't want to be too much of a baby, so he sat it next to him. And so later in that day, as I was sort of resting my feet, because they're quite swollen after walking so much, one of the volunteers happened to show me a picture on her digital camera, and she didn't know I knew this little boy, and that's what she showed me, Pierre hugging this stuffed animal while asleep. And that brought me a lot of joy to see that.
Sabine, we have 30 seconds before the break.
Yeah.
How has this experience stretched you in your faith?
Oh my word! That's a big question for a few minutes.
It's a one-liner.
It's a one-liner. I think it was a very sobering experience, and it I don't have a word except to say gratitude changes your priority. When God does something amazing for you, all you want to do is give back of yourself and be a gift in His name.
That's beautiful, Sabine. Thanks for sharing today.
Thank you.
We'll be right back after this message with Dr. Jason Shives. You're listening to Hope on Fire. Welcome back. I'm Chris Lang, your host on Hope on Fire, relevant talk radio for young adults. I'm here in the studio today with Dr. Jason Shives.
And bodies were still inside there.
Dr. James Shives describes a gruesome scene as he shares the pictures that he took while working in Haiti.
It looked like a war zone, like somebody dropped a bomb in the area.
As a doctor working in a Haitian hospital, Shives says hesitation was not an option.
You can be like, you know what, I can be fearful, or I can embrace the fear knowing that I can't do this, but I'm going to try, because if this was my mom, and this was my dad, this was my sister, I would try something, and I didn't want to just let them die.
Doing whatever it took, even if that meant performing procedures that he had only read about.
I mean, you can't go to a place like that and not be changed into somebody else that wants to do something. You can't. I mean, if you go there and you're the same person, I mean, there's something wrong.
Jason, welcome to our program today.
Thanks, Chris.
It's really awesome to have you. Now, you talked about jumping off a cliff or something before we started this program.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, as I was just reflecting over what the experience was like to go to Haiti, I've done mission trips before, and we usually plan months in advance for these types of things, and you you kind of know what you're going to get yourself into when you go to a place like Africa or India or something like that. But, when we knew that we were going to be able to go to Haiti within that first week of a first response type of mission trip, we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. And I remember in college, I had a bunch of friends that used to like to, jump off cliffs, and we were always trying to find a higher and higher cliff. And I remember there was this one cliff, I think it was like 80 feet up. And I remember standing there for a good 30 minutes thinking about whether I should do this. And I remember I was like, man, maybe what if I break my leg? And then someone came up and like just, didn't even think about it, just ran and jumped off the cliff. And I was like, wow, I didn't even think about it. And I was like, man, that was kind of the feeling I was getting as I was coming into Port-au-Prince was this, I know I have to jump off this cliff. I have no choice. But once you do it, it's kind of this sense of, I've made the decision. Now I have to deal with the consequences.
Did you feel like God was helping you grow wings on the way down?
I think so. Yeah, it definitely didn't feel like I broke anything while I was there, but it was quite an experience. Yeah. Something I've never experienced in my life.
So you landed there eventually, and Sabine talked about a delay at Miami Airport. You get there. You mentioned on the clip there was devastation everywhere. What was the first thing that you did, and things that you did that you had just read about? That sounds dramatic.
Well, when we first got to the hospital after, the whole ordeal, just getting to that hospital was a story in and of itself. But getting to the hospital, there was patients all over the place that needed surgical attention. And I'm not a surgeon. I like surgery. I contemplated going into that field. But
so you're in a family practice residency.
Yeah, exactly. I'm family medicine. And I get a lot of training in C-section, so I do some surgery in obstetrics. But I've never cut anyone's leg off before, and I've never had to open up somebody's abdomen without at least one of my attendings nearby to say, if you mess up, this is what you need to do. And we were, and I've never been an anesthesiologist before. We actually, what I had in the back of my mind was, prior to us getting there, many of these patients were getting their legs cut off or their arms put back together and things like that without any anesthesia at all.
Wow.
So the little knowledge I knew was like 10 times better than what they had. And so we were definitely bringing up the standard of care. So I was doing things that I probably saw someone else do before. I had read about it, and learning these techniques, and got the opportunity. And I think God blessed. He put his hand over me because I didn't have to practice on these people. I was able to do it and do it successfully without hurting anybody.
So talk about some of the most notable experiences. I mean, you talked about anesthesia, you talked about having to do amputations. What was it that was stretching you when you got there? I mean, what was going on in your mind and your spirit during that time?
I think the overwhelming challenge that I had to face was the chaos that we saw there. When we came to the hospital grounds, it was just the organization was in disarray. And
there was no other support systems yet on the ground, from what I heard.
The French army had just gotten to that hospital, and they were trying to bring some support. There's about 20 or 30 physicians plus, about 30 or 40 nurses that actually are based at that hospital on an ongoing basis throughout the year. Many of them had left the hospital because their own family members had been killed in the earthquake.
Wow.
or they wanted to go back and bury their dead or take care of their own family members. Many of them were suffering like major depression because of what had happened, and they didn't feel like they could come back and help others. And so the 5 physicians that were still there and I think about 10 nurses or so had been working around the clock for the last 5 days with hardly any sleep, and patients kept coming and coming and coming. When we showed up there, it was like a blessing. They were like, "Thank you so much." Our general surgeon, within about 5 minutes, was in an OR and had already started an amputation. Anesthesiologist was working on setting up another one, and they continued to work nonstop for about 48 hours. I popped in every once in a while to see how they were doing, but I think I quickly realized that I was going to be needed more in helping to organize the patients, because because there was so much disorganization, because there's so many people and not enough resources. Patients would be seen initially, but then they would be lost. They would be somewhere we couldn't find them. So we helped to set up an organization where the patients had a number system They had a record, and we were able to find them when their surgery was needed, and also triage them based upon the severity of their injuries, so that somebody with like a toe laceration wouldn't go ahead of somebody that had a broken femur or needed an amputation, that we would put them in the right order, because some injuries, if left alone for a long time, could lead to infection, and then they could lose more of a limb or their entire life. And so
that's amazing. That organization God gave you sort of in the crucible of crisis. That's a miracle. Because you made a comment in another part of your interview with the local Channel 6 here that we just saw, that we didn't show, that you said people didn't even want to be under a roof because they were so fearful that the buildings were going to fall on them, weren't they?
Yeah, well, I mean, we all heard about the 7.0 earthquake, but what people didn't realize is that every day, at least 2 or 3 aftershocks, pretty sizable ones, continue to happen. And so not only the memory of being in the rubble during that major earthquake, but the continued aftershocks. In fact, the second day after I got there, the largest aftershock to date occurred. And most of us had, taken a nap. It was about 5 in the morning. We had a long night, and we were laying down, and all the patients didn't want to be in the facility. It's a 70-bed hospital. We had 1,000 patients. We couldn't even fit them in there anyway. So it was kind of a mixed blessing, because there was no way we'd be able to choose who would be in the hospital anyway. But nobody wanted to be in any physical structure. On the way out to the hospital, people were sleeping on the streets at night, because they just didn't want to be near. I mean, they still had family members buried in these buildings, and so the post-traumatic stress that they were suffering. So I remember it was like 5 in the morning. And all of a sudden, there was a search and rescue dog, and he just starts like whining. And we were like, "Man, shut that dog up! We're trying to get some sleep here." And we find out later that he started whining about 15 minutes before a major earthquake happened. And I guess he was trying to warn us, and somehow he has some kind of sense. And so we get up, and the entire building, we're on the second floor, the building's shaking. We're starting to run out the room, and you try to put your right foot down, and the floor comes up to meet that foot, and one of our orthopedic surgeons said, "Man, I was trying to run down the stairs, and it felt like the stairs like jumped, like kind of pushed me up in the air."
Wow. So it was an up and down, not a side to side earthquake. It was
it was kind of both. It was almost like it was like this. And so it would go side to side, but it would go up and down at the same time. It was a unique experience. It lasted for about 10, 15 seconds, and after that, we felt sorry for the people, but we really were able to relate with the people after that, because we were able to experience the fear of not. I mean, the ground underneath you shaking is a very disconcerting feeling.
Jason, it's interesting. It seems significant that aftershock happened the morning after you got there, didn't it?
It did.
And you still had a couple of days to work.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you were working in a building.
We stayed in there because there was hardly anywhere else to work, and we just had to put our faith in God that He would keep that thing together.
That's
it was a miracle that it was still standing anyway, because I talked to the hospital administrator. He's like, "You think that was bad? The real earthquake we felt last week, it was 10 times stronger and lasted for over a minute. And for some reason, that building was the closest hospital from the epicenter, and it had the least amount of damage." It says God actually put His hand on there and said, "Listen, Satan, you don't get this one. I'm going to use this for some major work in the next few weeks." So.
People, seeing everything that they've known that's been tangible just gone in a moment. How did you minister to people that lost everything?
It was something that I really didn't have time to do. I mean, I have to be honest. We brought some counselors with us, some chaplains with us, and we brought this one lady who was a specialist in mental grief management, and she really invested herself into the patients, getting to know them and hear about their tragedies and all the grief they were going through. She was supposed to be there for over a week, and she didn't last but a few days, and she herself broke down from all the pain that she internalized.
Wow.
I didn't have that experience because I was so worried about just saving their physical lives. Yeah. How can you minister to these people if they're dead? And so I was just trying to keep them alive. And it wasn't until I remember I got back Friday night, and then one of the local churches around here, a Deeper, was asked to give a presentation. And then also at another group right before that. And I started telling the same story I'd mentioned before, and I started just crying. And I just broke down because
it was
like,
as if this was... Your adrenaline was gone, and you had a chance for it to settle in.
Yeah, and and my wife was like, I think I've seen you cry once in our marriage,
Wow.
you know, and I couldn't stop. It just kept coming and coming because we saw hundreds of patients, and everyone had some major life-changing wound or injury, and many of them, almost every single person had lost somebody close to them.
We've got a minute left, Jason. What word would you leave with our viewers today as far as getting stretched outside their limits?
Do it. You should do it. I mean, if God gives you the opportunity to be able to go outside of your limits, and He is leading you in that direction, not just doing it because you want to, but if He's leading you to a place to help someone else, to be, the Bible says that greater love has no man than this, that He'd be able to lay His life down for His brother. And so I think that if God places it on your heart, then do it. Haiti is an excellent place. The people are lovely. You hear a lot about the violence and things on the news, but there is still a lot of need. We can go there for years and not finish what we need to finish there.
You're going to Africa in a couple of weeks with a planned stretch of your limits.
Yeah, that'll be an experience, and knowing that God can lead us anywhere we go, it's a comfort.
God bless, Jason. Thanks for joining us
today.
Thank you,
Chris.
We all have limitations in life. Family, resources, talents, and fears often keep us inside our own city limits. From the stories you've heard today, you see how God can more than make up for our limitations and give us the courage to push outside our comfort zone. For when we help others in need, we in turn reap the blessings of a stronger faith in God and strength for challenges ahead. God bless you. We'll see you next time.
Hope on Fire is produced by Livestreams Media, a listener-supported ministry. To download a free copy of today's program or be a part of our social network, please visit our website at hopeonfire.org. You may also contact us by writing to Livestreams Media, P.O. Box 608513, Orlando, Florida 32860, or online at hopeonfire.org. Thank you so much for your letters and continued support. Until next time, may God set your hope on fire.